Coming up.
So people are probably aware of the five sensory systems, but we actually have 8. If we've got a beautiful, I suppose, sensory nervous system where the sensory information is like flowing beautifully up the central nervous system, does the loop around the brain. I almost kind of refer to it almost like a bit of a circuit. It goes up around the brain and it just flows beautifully. Then, as I say, your body generally is receiving the sensory information, processing it, and being able to respond to it appropriately. Mm-hmm. But when you have a bit of an interference, so it's almost like a bit of a loophole, the sensory data goes up the central nervous system, almost loops around, gets a little bit like disorganized, disconnected. And from that is, as I say, where we might have the poor fine motor skills, the poor gross motor skills, and the emotional regulation skills. So we might have like what I would refer to as a brain and body disconnection.
We have a special offer for our Munch Bunch listeners. To book a virtual consult with Megan, she's offering a discount of $25 off. Just email her, Megan, at nwmyofunctionaltherapy.com or through her website, www.orofacial-myology.com. To book a virtual consult with Kimmy for the $25 off, email her mouthmusclememory@outlook.com or through the website, www.mouthmusclememory.com. Now on to the episode.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Munch Bunch podcast. It's Kimi Nishimoto and Megan Van Noy.
Hello.
And today we have our friend Claire Joyce from Down Under. She is an occupational therapist in the Sydney, Australia region. And you also may have seen that she just wrote a book for children with sensory issues called How Does Your Body Feel? So, Claire, tell us a little bit about what you do, like who is your target audience for your books, and also like what kind of got you into your field.
Well, thank you so much, Kimmy and Megan, for having me on today. So nice to catch up, because I obviously follow you both on Instagram, so I'm big Instagram. But yeah, so my name is Claire Joyce, and I am a pediatric occupational therapist working in Sydney, Australia. I have always worked in the area of pediatrics since I graduated in 2009. And my love for pediatrics has just grew over the years of working with children. I have, as you mentioned, just recently created a little resource called How Does Your Body Feel, which probably has been inspired by my own children. So I became a mummy 5 years ago to my first little boy, Patrick. And then 15 months later, I had another little boy, Lachlan. I entered into motherhood thinking I was probably well equipped with my pediatric background, probably naively thinking that I was pretty prepared.
Oh, yeah, been there.
And boy, was I wrong. I always think, look, they have definitely been sent to me to teach me many things, but basically, my second little boy is very, very fiery, very explosive. He's a big reactor. So I have always worked with children who had emotional regulation difficulties, but now that I experience it firsthand, to be honest, I was probably, I personally have struggled myself as a mother. And that's obviously with my background, pediatric knowledge. So it's from there, I suppose, my passion for obviously helping families and helping children has definitely significantly increased. Obviously, I was always very passionate, but because I experienced it firsthand now, I, to be honest, it's probably just absolutely changed the way that I now work. And I'm very passionate, as I say, about helping families. So I do use a lot of curriculums and other like evidence-based practices in my therapy sessions. However, also applying the same curriculums and I suppose practices with my own children, I seen how much they struggled as well to fully relate to the curriculums that we use. But that just led me on to creating the books. So the books are a little resource that any child can use. So all children can absolutely benefit from reading the books. But they probably are a resource that I have created to particularly help those children who really struggle with the emotional difficulties. The imagery throughout the books are very simple. They're beautiful, they're colorful. I find that a lot of these little ones are visual learners. So as I say, they relate to the pictures. And then from that, when we are having like episodes of emotional outbursts, I find that they almost recall the image, and then that's what kind of brings on the memory of what to do. So yes, that is a little bit about why, I suppose why I'm so passionate. It definitely has been inspired from my own children and the challenges that I have also personally experienced as a parent now. So I trying to do my best, like everyone else, try to share information through social medias. I'm mindful that so many people are also without like access to therapies. Those families in particular would probably benefit from the likes of the books, and obviously information that's shared through social media is just to try to give them something as well when they don't have access to seeing a therapist.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story and also like being real, because like it's not easy to be the parent of a kid who has a hard time regulating their emotions. I don't have children, but I've worked with kids like that. And I'm always giving props to those parents because it is hard. It's intense.
Yeah, it's really hard. And even coming from, so I laughed when you're like, yeah, I thought I would have everything under control. I knew what to do. I know how babies work. I know how pacifiers work. I know how, breastfeeding works. Right. And then obviously everybody knows my toddler, Isabel. And it's been like a big cosmic joke that like my baby couldn't breastfeed because I had milk production issues, and my baby's favorite thing in the entire world is her pacifier, and she triple fists her pacifier, and Kimmy knows that. Like she's triple fisting. She's got like several in her hands, one in her mouth, and then she loves her bottle, right? And she just like, and I know all these things, right? And then it's like your own kid and your own mom heart, and you're like, okay, like I know this is actually a bigger struggle for me to have to like implement these things than it is going to be for her, because kids are resilient, right? And then, you layer that on, I'm very blessed with Isabel's temperament, and I know that. But I have nieces and nephews. I've had patients who don't have the same temperament, and, being able to emotionally regulate is so hard.
Oh, absolutely. And as you've absolutely said as well, to be honest, when you have your own children as well, like the rule book just goes out the window.
Oh yeah.
So everything that I have preached before, I have definitely been guilty. I put my hand up that probably also before children, I would have give pages upon pages of exercises to do, and just do therapy sessions every day. And now when I have my own children, I just say, oh my goodness. So as I say, it's definitely changed the way I am now, as I say, practice as an occupational therapist. But similar to that, like screen time, All of the things that I say, don't do, we're all guilty of it. We do it. And I've used the pacifiers and the bottles. And yeah, it's, look, at the end of the day, we all can only do our best. And you can only do your best with what you have at that time. So, yeah, it's definitely been a journey, but the emotional regulation side of things is one now where I am particularly passionate about, because like there is studies and research that like suggest and support that children who have emotional regulation difficulties, it can directly impact then their performance at home, their relationships, their performance within the classroom, how much they enjoy school, etc., etc. So also probably years ago, when I practiced as an occupational therapist, I would have very much probably been more focused on the fine motor skills and the gross motor skills side of things. But as I say, a big piece of the puzzle is the emotional regulation. If we have a child who can regulate, generally speaking, they will be able to complete the tasks such as the fine motor skills and the gross motor skills activities. If a child who has difficulty with the regulation, who is constantly in that fight, flight, or freeze arousal state, to be honest, we're not really going to get them to do all of the functional tasks. So the regulation is definitely a big area, and obviously things like how we breathe and how we sleep significantly impacts regulation in both children and adults.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too, Claire. Like a lot of times the kids that I've seen that have issues with the emotional regulation, or they're like the quote sensory kids, or the ones that act out, they're often kind of sleep wrecked at the same time. So it's a little bit of both, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so from an occupational therapy perspective, or from your perspective, where is the emotional regulation issues coming from? Is it a sensory thing? Is it like an autistic spectrum? Is it like the nervous system got flipped to fight or flight and it's having a hard time switching back?
Well, that is an excellent question. It's probably difficult to answer, to be honest. It can be a number of things. So when I have a child coming through who has the emotional regulation difficulties, generally speaking, they will have like a number of other difficulties kind of going hand in hand. I kind of always as well like preach to parents, like there's so much about what we can do after the child is born for child development, but in actual fact, healthy child development starts before the baby is even conceived. So when we look at like the environmental factors, the health of the mommy and daddy, the genetics is obviously a big thing as well that can influence the development of a baby. Then when the female's obviously pregnant, how the female, her health within the pregnancy can also influence on how a baby develops. And then that's taken us up to the birthing stage. Obviously, babies who kind of birth very textbook, those little babies, even despite any interventions being used within the birthing experience itself, with the enormous pressure that's put on the baby to come through the birth canal.
And the mom.
Like 1 day old baby can already have such a kind of, I suppose, a big torment experience. So and then that's not even taken into consideration children or babies who's born maybe via C-section, forceps delivery, all of the interventions. So we've got a 1-day-old baby who their little central nervous system may already have an interference. So basically, if we've got a beautiful, I suppose, sensory nervous system where the sensory information is like flowing beautifully up the central nervous system, does the loop around the brain. I almost kind of refer to it almost like a bit of a circuit. It goes up around the brain and it just flows beautifully. Then, as I say, your body generally is receiving the sensory information, processing it, and being able to respond to it appropriately. But when you have a bit of an interference, so it's almost like a bit of a loophole, the sensory data goes up the central nervous system, almost loops around, gets a little bit like disorganized, disconnected. And from that is, as I say, where we might have the poor fine motor skills, the poor gross motor skills, and the emotional regulation skills. So we might have like what I would refer to as a brain and body disconnection. So obviously, as I've kind of mentioned, the before the baby's even conceived, the pregnancy and then the birth can obviously really have that influence on how a baby develops. But then when a baby obviously is born, then within those first years, I suppose sadly, there is little babies that do not like tummy time. There's babies that, and it is very, very stressful. If your baby does not like tummy time, you probably are going to want to cuddle your little baby. But the baby in those first couple of years definitely needs a lot of stimulation, a lot of, as I said, tummy time. Tummy time can also be done just be placed on your chest. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be like a baby on the ground. But the first couple of years can really also influence how a baby develops. But as I say, look, we don't know what the cause is. And as I say, as an occupational therapist with my own children, I thought I had ticked all of those boxes. And it is just, as I say, like at the end of the day, all children are different, all children are unique. And it's more about now supporting children to know how to improve their little skills and also like manage. So there's a lot of adults as well who could most likely be on the spectrum who have never been diagnosed. So we have a higher rate of diagnosis now, and that's probably due to like people are more aware, or diagnosis is significantly improved. But the emotional regulation difficulties, that definitely can fall under the spectrum. Doesn't always. There is children that maybe are diagnosed with anxiety disorders who are not diagnosed with like autism. However, I see a lot of children now that the criteria for autism has changed. So I see a lot of the little children who years ago who would not have got say a diagnosis are now being diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder.
We want to introduce the spot for Tots Course, a parent's guide for toddlers ages 2 to 5 for Mini Myo. We have Megan and Kimmy going over nasal hygiene, myofunctional exercises, breathing exercises, tongue tie, healing protocols, and then we have Jenny June going over sleep hygiene and Kelsey Baker going over feeding therapy and body work. The course is $297 and the link will be in the description.
When you were talking about the circuit, that was really interesting. I was just thinking about that. Like I went to Italy this summer, and if I used the stove while the oven was on, it would go on the fritz and I'd have to walk down 3 flights of stairs and turn the breaker on and off every time I cooked. So I really liked that analogy because I was like, yes, it makes sense to me. Something is getting like a little haywire.
Yeah.
So going back to what you're talking about with the sensory issues or sensory processing disorder, for our listeners that maybe don't know, or they're like curious, like maybe does my kid have an issue with this? What are the common sensory processing disorders, or what would that look like symptom
Yeah, what are
wise?
some markers that would indicate that for parents?
Well, we now, like I'm not sure if many people are aware, but we now refer to our sensory systems as having 8 sensory systems. So people are probably aware of the 5 sensory systems, but we actually have 8. So we've obviously got our vision, our touch, our smell, taste,
Hearing.
but we've got 3 other what we call like internal systems. So we have the vestibular system, which is all to do with like our movement and balance. We have our proprioceptive system, which is to do with our body awareness and how I suppose we know where our body is in space. And then we have interoceptive system, which is to do with our registration. So it's basically how we register what the internal organs are doing. So that can be things like, do we know if we need a drink? Do we know if we're hungry? Whether there is children necessarily that have poor interoceptive awareness, so they will not be able to feel pain. They mightn't react to pain the same as another child. They mightn't be able to be aware of hot and cold. So that's the interoceptive system, whether we need to use the toilet. So as I say, those children will have difficulty with that area, but I'll just quickly run through. So basically what I would also advise parents is it's only ever an issue if it's impacting functional ability. So we all obviously process sensory information. We all like respond to sensory information. It's only an issue, however, if it's impacting our functional ability. So when we think of our senses as well, we have touch. So again, that could be whether your child is like seeking touch or avoiding. So as I say, we either do we do, I suppose, either of those things. So you might have a child who's really seeking that touch and constantly needs to fiddle with their fingers. That might interfere with obviously doing work in the classroom or interfere with other functional tasks. Or we might have the child who avoids touching anything. So it's like cutting with scissors and then needing to glue the activity. They'll not touch the glue. It's too yucky. It's they don't like that. It could be the same as water. Some children love water. Some children dislike water. Some children will seek water play to maybe the extent it could be dangerous, where they might turn on water, the taps in the bathroom and play. And then, as I say, the bathroom could be flooded. I have seen that happen before. Or we could the other extreme as well, where children dislike water and then they will not take a shower, will not bath, will not wash their face, will not brush their teeth, etc., etc. So as I say, if it interferes with what we need to do in our everyday life, that's when it is I suppose problem. Similarly, so as I say, we've got taste, we've got children who actually eat a lot, and then we've got the children who are really fussy eaters. So that, as I say, is bringing it back to the taste, the oral kind of sensory system, where the children are become avoidant of eating. So it's usually more a problem when the child will not eat. So those children as well will typically see that if they do eat foods, they'll typically be like your white carby food, your chicken nugget, white bread. So obviously that can also impact in their diet and their nutrition. And it's obviously very stressful on families as well, because they usually then can't usually eat out, go to different family functions, even they'll have to send like lunchbox to schools, and it will be food such as the chicken nuggets and the white bread sandwich. We have the noise hearing. So we'll have children who will seek noise. So I have worked with lots of children who will seek noise by maybe making like high-pitched squeals, and that will just again interfere with kind of home life, because it can be quite high. Their performance in the classroom, like, to be honest, the high-pitched noise can be quite unpleasant for other people. But they're seeking that loud noise because it actually regulates their body. But then, as I say, on the other hand, we'll have children then who will dislike noises, loud noises. They will, I suppose they might not go to birthday parties. They might not want to go to school. They might not like the hair dryer, the hand dryers in the toilets. So because of that, then they'll become avoidant. So as I said, that is that one. And then we have the smell. So similar, to be honest, smell is probably one I don't necessarily see too often. Children generally will dislike smells, which might then cross over into their meal times and eating, so they'll avoid certain foods. Or they might seek smells where they'll enjoy a smell. But generally speaking, we can manage that well. But I suppose if there is like quite a if they don't like a certain smell, it can also impact with entering into particular environments. Again, maybe the classroom, or like a canteen, maybe with the smell of food. And then also we've got the sight. So again, we can get very visually distracted. Children within a classroom, if we have all of the beautiful wall displays, we'd be very visually distracted, so it can impact attention and how a child performs in the classroom. Or as I say, you'll have the other where a child will seek visual stimulation and enjoy flashing lights or hold things very, very close to their eyes. Again, interfering with what we need to do every day. And then, as I say, we've got the three other big, larger systems, the internal systems. So we have the vestibular system, which is to do with movement and balance. Typically speaking, I will see little children who really seek movement. So these are the children who are constantly on the go. They are seeking that movement, lots of vestibular stimulation. They will do things like jumping off the sofas, swinging on chairs. A lot of the time, probably very unsafe play. They're usually the thrill seekers. They really just crave that movement. So that can obviously interfere with performance in the classroom when we have children who are constantly moving their bodies. It can also interfere with relationships and interactions, because they're generally also in other people's spaces. They lack the control of their body. But on the other, as I say, hand, we have the children who avoid movement. So they will not want to climb at the play parks. They'll not enjoy the swings. They might be very static, that they will sit on their mummy's knee when they're at a play park. So it will interfere with their play, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
They don't their body to what we would expect, like say, a typical child to do. We've also got the proprioceptive system, which is to do with how we move our body, our awareness of where our body is in space. Usually we'll find these little ones with poor proprioceptive awareness presenting as very clumsy, trip over things, knock into people, again, being in other people's space. This can also interfere with how they perform in sports. They're usually quite uncoordinated as well, because they're not getting that feedback through their muscles and joints to be aware of how they're moving their body, if that makes sense. And then, as I say, we'll also typically see these ones maybe seeking it as well. So you can be a little bit of both as well. within each sensory system. So we usually have seeking or avoiding, or we might have a little bit of both as well. Sensory processing as well can very much depend on how we are on the day. And as I say, like, it just changes and fluctuates every day. So that also can really depend on how well we sleep at night, how well we've eaten that day, all of these other factors that will influence on how we're going to receive the sensory input on that day to process it. And then we've got the interoceptive system. So again, as I've mentioned, little ones, when I have seen with poor interoception, usually as well have difficulties with the emotional regulation, because they are a little bit out of sync. They're not being fully aware of how their body is feeling. They're just having these big reactions, but they're not understanding, I suppose, like the physical sensation versus what we can do. We'll also see a lot of these wee ones not drinking throughout the day because they are unaware that their body is thirsty. They will not, because they are not hungry. They might have a lot of accidents at the toilet because they're not registering that they need to urinate or have a bowel movement. Or you might have little ones who will use the toilet a lot because they're aware that they have low registration, so then they're being extra cautious, if that makes sense. There'll be the little ones as well who will have difficulty differentiating between hot and cold. So I'll see a lot of these little ones as well are at risk of burns, because they literally could touch something like a hot surface and not register that it is hot. So it can interfere as well, even in terms of weather. So if we have beautiful warm weather, you'll see maybe these little ones dressed with long sleeves, long clothes, long pants, if that's what their preference of clothes is. But similar, if it's very, very hot weather, if it's very, very cold weather, then they could be in the opposite. If they've got a preference to wearing shorts and short sleeves, then as I say, this is what, so it's, I suppose, how your body registers and makes sense of the sensory data it receives. But as I say, it is important to remember that we all do like process sensory information. There's definitely things in those areas that I will dislike or avoid. Like there's certain things that I will not like to eat. I will not like to touch. I might, like, there'll be people who will crave lots of movement. They'll go for runs in the morning before they go to work. We subconsciously know how to manage our symptoms. So we will subconsciously put into place what works to regulate our own bodies. But as I say, there are certain things, as I say, I don't like to touch and eat, and et cetera. However, providing it's not interfering with what I'm trying to do throughout the day, it's fine. Like, for instance, if I don't like to eat tomatoes, I will just make a sandwich with ham or chicken and put other things in it. So we'll always find a way just to kind of manage, as I say, subconsciously, how we manage our own sensory systems.
Yeah, that's so cool. So when, like, so parents are looking for this, they kind of have some things to look out for. If they recognize these symptoms, like, in their child, what are some resources for them? Because does every occupational therapist specialize in this? Is that something, like, is there something they need to, like, somebody they need to seek for help that is really kind of specialized in that space?
Absolutely. So I would probably say that occupational therapists would be the best person to contact. Typically speaking, a lot of occupational therapists now are like, they're very aware of sensory processing. It's a big part of our roles as occupational therapists. But I suppose it's all about exposure. So we do want to expose the child to sensory experiences, but it's also really, really, really important to do it very gradually. And very much respect the child's fears or need for that sensory experience. So it's about, as I say, every child is different. So every treatment plan will be very individual for the child that you're working with. So for a parent, say for instance, who is not accessing occupational therapy, they can start by doing little bursts of, for instance, if your child is seeking movement, things like a trampoline, play parks, things like that are excellent. And giving the child, I often relate to it as it's almost what the body is craving. Sometimes I do use the analogy of, if I'm craving chocolate, if I was to eat a carrot, it doesn't satisfy my body. I still want the chocolate. So it's important to give the child the sensory input that they're craving. Otherwise, they're just going to continue to be dysregulated. So it's just about doing it in very gradual exposure.
Beautiful.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, give the child the sensory input that they are craving. Because, yeah, I mean, and this is obviously like one lens, but there's always those conversations around like healthy eating or like, you know, diet culture, weight loss, whatever it is that you want to, you know, call it. But, you know, someone will say, if you want that chocolate bar, take those 2 bites of chocolate versus going in your like fridge or somewhere else to find like 20 other things that you end up eating to try and crave that. And you end up eating more calories from those 20 healthy things than from those like 2 bites of chocolate that you were craving.
You probably still won't be satisfied. And as you say, you've went just on a big like loop around to try to fulfill that craving or need. So I'm very much about exactly giving it within moderation. So yeah.
I love it. Well, it's been such a joy to have you and learn these things. Would you indulge us by maybe reading a little excerpt from one of your new books? Because I know that while you're pulling up your book, Claire is also offering through Instagram, so we'll have you guys go follow her through the weekend, a downloadable version on Kindle. So let's give him a little teaser, give him a little taste of what your books wrote.
Okay, thank you so much. So as I've mentioned, the books talk about the emotions and some of the regulation tools to use. So I've got this little one on feeling sad. So I'll read this one. So I'll hold this up. So when my body feels sad, then my body feels glum. When my body feels miserable, then my body feels numb. My heart feels like it's hurting and tears trickle down my face. My body feels lost and lonely and I feel really out of place. My head feels very busy and my stomach can churn too. My body sometimes feels sleepy when my thoughts are grey and blue. I try to remember to stop and reflect and bring focus to my mood. What is making my body feel sad and what could make it feel good?
I love that.
That's so cute.
Yeah, it's so sweet and just kind of really breaks it down. Obviously, like it flows really well together. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, they are. I have been using these, to be honest, in my therapy sessions for the last 3 months. So they have been trial and tested, but children appear to relate well to them. So I just have little, then, as I say, lots of regulation tools, and they're very simple and realistic for parents to implement at home. So I find children definitely learn from the books, but also parents have reported that they have learned from the books as well, because in times when they're experiencing those big emotions, sometimes we don't know what to do. So we're back to the book, they can offer those regulation tools.
That's really cool.
I love that. I love that. I was like having kind of like a hard day where I felt like just like overwhelmed. And when you read that beginning part, I just wanted to cry. So,
So these books work for grown-ups too, is what
yeah,
we're hearing.
apparently. All right.
Oh, I
Thank
love it.
you
Okay.
so much for being on today.
Yes.
And everyone who wants to follow you on Instagram, what is your Instagram handle?
So my Instagram is learn through play _ children's OT.
Okay,
Perfect. And we'll bring that into, and if people want to purchase your books, where can they find them?
So they will be, as I say, going up on Kindle. I will share the link as well on my own Instagram. But they are up on Kindle at the moment, but I will be running that free 5-day download commencing on Monday. But I'll put all of the instructions on Instagram, but basically just searching how does your body feel should bring up the box set.
So awesome. Yeah. I feel like that would be so great for Isabel too, as we are heading into the toddler years, and we're working on our emotional regulation ourselves.
Absolutely. And one of the things as well from becoming a parent, I've realized I need to, from a personal experience, as a parent, it's really important to manage your own emotions. So often, even when I'm reading these books to say, for instance, my own children, it is a nice reminder for myself where I reflect as well and think, I need to practice what I preach. So as I say, look, all of the strategies are obviously for children, adults. They are occupational therapy strategies. I have referred as well to curriculums that have been used in occupational therapy. They are very subtle. So an occupational therapist would be aware of the curriculums, but as I say, they're completely relatable to all families. You don't need to be attending occupational therapy to be aware of any curriculums or specific strategies as such. So they're very relatable books. They're very, as I say, realistic strategies to implement at home. But yes, they're definitely a nice reminder. And I have got a lot of nice feedback. So yeah, I hope, as I say, you enjoy them.
Yes, thank you for sharing. And we will definitely repost and share links in the description for the box set and also how to contact you if needed. And everybody, you know where to find us on Instagram at the Munch Bunch Podcast. You can watch episodes on Spotify. You can listen to us on Anchor, Apple, or watch on YouTube. And we will definitely link you in the description as well. And thank you for sharing your perspective, because this is a new sort of thing that we haven't talked about yet. So thank you for sharing it with us.
Yeah, and I think it was so cool to hear that there's 3 more sensory that, because I would have never, I didn't know that. So, but I could think of my niece having struggles knowing when she has to go potty, and so some of these things has been so interesting to make connections to, not just my own daughter, but the people I know in my life too. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And yes, I will look forward to seeing the podcast go live. I'll have to watch.
All right, we'll catch you guys for our next episode. Remember, they release every Monday. If you want to follow us personally on Instagram, you can catch Kimmy at Mouth Muscle Memory. You can catch me at NWMFT. And we will keep sharing all the information from all over the world.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.